Sometime between the 15th to the 17th century, an idea was born that the descendants of Adam and Eve had evolved into separate and distinct races of people. In doing so, markers were created giving these so-called races skin colors that helped identify these new classifications. In this investigative look, we are taken to the Netherlands to give ear to a possible theory regarding albinism and if there is a connection to white skin. Extreme albinoism. What does that look like? Explain that.
I guess the picture that you just the picture that you just saw, the picture that you envisioned,
Right.
that is the stereotypical, that's albinism or albinism.
And that's
it's
extreme.
When you lack
That's
pigment in the eyes, in the
Right.
hair, in your skin. That's albinism. That's OCH1, I guess.
so if I go
the first type.
I go to Sweden, never been there, but from Hollywood and movies, Swedes, female Swedes, are tall and blonde, pale in skin, blue eyes. Would that be considered extreme albinoism? Or is that a different type than what you just described?
No, the Swedish are just like the Europeans here in Holland, for example. And then, of course, you have phenotype. So I could look at a Dutch lady here, and I could look like a typical Swedish person, and I can tell the difference. Some people might not, but I would be able to see, like, okay, this person is clearly from Scandinavia and is not a Dutch person. But they both still have OCH2. They both still have albinism. So your phenotype doesn't really tell you a lot about this disease. Because again, I look more like a West African, but then if you see my sister or my mom, phenotypically, they look more like East Africans. But since we all have brown eyes, brown hair or black hair, black skin, we do not have albinism. We are just 100% African.
Gotcha.
So for these two, they might phenotypically not look alike, but they do still have the same mutation in the genes that cause albinism.
How did albinoism come into play?
Well, albinism is a genetic disorder. So there's not really something you can do or eat or whatever to get it. It's not contagious. It's a genetic disorder. So when your DNA mutates, there's a possibility for you to get this disease. And again, both your parents need to be carriers in order for you to get it. So again, chances are 1 in 4 of you to get it. And there was this study of gorillas where 2 gorillas, one uncle and a niece, had a baby gorilla, and this baby gorilla came out with albinism. So there's some people who say, well, inbreeding or incest might not be the cause because, again, it's genetic, but there's a possibility. Let me read something for you.
Why did you say inbreeding? Are there studies that links inbreeding to albinoism?
Not studies, but, well, let me read this out loud. Okay. Wait 2 seconds. So, again, it's genetic, so there's nothing you can do to get this apart from having parents who carry the genes. So, okay, let me read this out loud. Incest is not the cause of albinism, but can increase the likelihood of offspring having the disorder. So I'm guessing there are studies being done, but they can't really figure out what it is or how it came about. But what we do know for sure is that it's the DNA that mutates.
It's a mutated
that causes,
DNA. Now, It's a mutation of DNA. Here's where
Yeah.
I want to. That's a lot of information, and I'm wrapping my mind around it, and I'm following you. I'm seeing where you're going. Here's the piece.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the piece that I want to know. So, in Europe, the Europeans have a look which you've said is some form or another, or a level of albinoism. So for some reason, it has centered itself in a specific region in this world. Now we know people have moved and traveled around, so we're going back to an earlier time. How did, or is it possible, or has it been traced, studied as to how it got to the regions to where it is and why it's so densely populated to have albinoism in that one region?
Yeah, well, it has a very logic reason, and then, of course, there's the out of Africa theory. So the most basic or logic reason is people populate. So people have babies. People populated the world, and out of those people, of course, you have the original people, the blacks, and then black DNA mutates, and then there's white. The reason why it's in Europe, again, people have babies, and also they migrated to Europe. They are not originally from Europe. Another thing that people need to know is that we use the word Caucasian a lot because people believe that white people came from the Caucasus Mountains.
Right.
This is false, and anybody can do this. This is an easy Google search. This is false. This is actually scientific racism. It was a German anthropologist, I guess, or a philosopher or something that came up with the name, actually. So white people do not come from that region. They migrated out of Asia to Europe. And the proof in that can be found in their Y DNA haplogroup R, R1 and R1A and B. So that tells us that their ancestors came from Asia. Now, if you look at Asians today, they do not look anything phenotypically like the Caucasians or white people that we know today.
That's right.
So something happened there. And to understand what happened there, you need to go all the way back to Africa and literally track the DNA and see what happened there in order to understand the migration from Africa into India, into Asia, and then all the way to Europe. And again, I told you that Europe used to be black before, well, the albinos came there. Yeah, so we were just talking about incest, and they say there's a likelihood, so there's a possibility that it's incest. I agree. And the reason for that is, well, what I just said about in the beginning about Adam and Eve. There was only a handful of people on the planet. So, and those people obviously were family. And it's even clear with Noah and his family, there's only a handful of people, 8 in total. So they had to inbreed in order for them to populate the world. So inbreeding, incest. So there's a possibility that that's how the first mutations came about.
Okay.
And then you have this white skin, you have children with extreme pale skin, no pigmentation, no melanin. And you know what happens if you don't have pigment, you don't have melanin, and you're under the sun. This is not a good combination.
Right.
The sun will kill you, literally. So what happened is these people were fleeing. They were trying to get out of Africa, look for, now comes the theory of higher altitudes, colder climates. They're looking for cold weather. They're looking for any place that's not the sun.
A suitable
where the
condition,
sun doesn't shine.
a suitable climate for their skin condition.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So they're moving out of Africa. They're going into India. And so the person where I got this information from says that the white or the Caucasian race are actually Dravidian Dravidian Indian albinos. So from India, not Native Americans, not Indians, but from India. And if you look at Dravidian Indians and you look at a Caucasian, now you'll see what I mean with their albinos. So when people see, for example, a Somalian person or Eritrean or Ethiopian person, white people tend, and even us black people, we tend to say, oh, you look a lot like a white person. Phenotypically, you look more like a Caucasian than I do. I look more like a West African. You have a, sharp nose, a long nose, soft hair. You look like a Caucasian. But it's the other way around. White people look like us. We don't resemble them. It's the other way around. So if you look at the Dravidian Indians, they are a very dark-skinned people, a nation of South India. So again, they're moving out of Africa. They're going into India, where
when
the sun shines as well.
When you say South Africa, you're talking
they're now going into
Sri Lanka, Tamil. You're talking about
exactly.
that. Okay.
Yeah, the sun shines there as well. The DNA of Indian ladies is mutating. They're having albino children as well. They're fleeing the sun as well. So they're now going into Central Asia, where it's a little bit more colder, higher altitudes. And boom, what do they find there? The sun shines everywhere. You see white people going on ski vacation and they come back with burned faces because the sun shines everywhere.
The sun is the sun.
Now.
The sun is the sun. So wherever you go, the sun is
exactly.
the sun. Yep.
Exactly. So they're in Central Asia, Mongolia to be exact. And surprise, surprise, it's a black nation, black Mongolians. If you don't believe me, look it up. Asia used to be fully black. So they're there now, and some of them stayed there, some of them left. But to prove that this is actually true, that they took this path, is because if you go to a place called Tarim and look up the Tarim mummies, you'll find white-skinned mummies. And if you check out their DNA, their haplogroups, their empty DNAs, you'll see that they share the same DNA as the Caucasians that we know today. The white race, the Europeans, they share the same DNA. So these are Y DNA haplogroup R, 1A and B, will send you straight there to that point. So this is why we know this is true. They left from there and went into Europe. So the reason why white people look like they look today and not like a stereotypical albino is because they mix with black Asians. So you have an albino of Dravidian descent. You are Dravidian Indian, but you have albinism. So you're mixing with a black Asian, and boom, you have a white race. And again, you can find this by tracking the Y DNA haplogroup R and its ancestry.
So this is a mutation, but mixed. It's not a full mutation and just staying to themselves. It's a mutation of genes, and then it's mixing into a pool of different shades of melanin, which has caused this particular.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So you remember that picture that I made you read just now?
Yes.
It said something about Asians as well. So it said, let me see if I can find it real quick.
It says Asians share the fully. Yep.
Sorry?
I was going to read it. It says Asians share the fully functional version of SLC24A5, but have acquired mutations in other genes that result in lighter skin, while retaining black hair. Francis Collins is stating the source, The Language of Life, New York, Harper, 2010.
Yeah. So then the picture down below, same thing. Let me just read it again. The derived alleles SLC24A5A and SLC45A2G both have frequencies higher than 90% in Europeans, but are much more rare or absent in Africans and East Asians. allele frequencies of tag SNPS in pigmentation genes studied in African, East Asian, and European populations. So what you have here is that the modern Asians today are also have genes that mutated, of course, because the way they look. They have light skin, but with a little bit more pigment than the European Caucasians do. But they still have black hair and dark eyes.
But other
so that
features
means that
of
they have some genes that mutated, but
Gotcha.
not the same as the Caucasians do, as the white Europeans do.
Gotcha. Interesting. That's this is very. How long have you been studying on or looking into this in some shape or form?
Well, I knew about this for a long, long time. I never really studied it because the people who were telling me this were, how can I say, diehard. I guess you can put them in the same region as, same level as Black Panthers. Very, very fierce, very pro-black, very anti-white. I'm not saying that the Panthers were anti-white, but the people who told me about this information, very anti-white, very aggressive about the way,
They had biases. Sounds like they had some strong biases.
Exactly.
Right.
So I felt like it's more likely to be, racism from blacks towards whites than it would be the truth. So now, years later, I came across this information again, and I was like, let me just see if there's any truth to this. And once you start reading it, and you put two and two together, and like I said, I feel like you cannot just take the Bible and boom, that's the truth, or take science and boom, that's the truth. I feel like you need to take all the pieces of evidence, put them together, and eventually they will all lead you to one point, one and the same point. But the most important point is science. You cannot lie about science. There's no way of hiding, unless it's scientific racism, of course. But eventually, if they say, okay, well, we're Europeans, this is our homeland, we come from here, fine, you can say it. But your DNA is telling a different story.
Got you.
Yeah.
You've mentioned scientifical racism. What is that? What do you mean by that?
Scientific racism is basically information spread by white people, of course, made up by white people, in order to mislead anybody that's not white. For example, the word Caucasian in itself, to me, that's scientific racism because white people do not come from the Caucasus region. They do not come from those mountains. So why would you say that? You can only say such a thing if you know who you actually are. Why would you lie about who you are and give yourself a different name? This means that white people were
What's the
aware.
benefit? What's the benefit of saying they're from the Caucasus Mountains?
I feel like the benefit. Well, the person who decided to use that name is actually Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, a German. And let me just read what he had to say about the white skin, the white race. So he said, "I have taken the name of this variety from Mountain Caucasus, both because its neighborhood and especially its southern slope produces the most beautiful race of man. I mean the Georgian. And because all physiological reasons converge to this, that in that region, if anywhere, it seems we ought with the greatest probability to place the autochthons birthplace of mankind."
Gotcha.
So he admits that he only chooses this name because he felt like that region produces the most beautiful race of man. They do not actually come from there.
Solid point. Okay. You seem to be on point with that. Melody, what is your religious affiliation or background? Are you a Bible believer?
I am, but I'm very careful. I'm very careful with it because I know that the Bible has been tampered with. It's been rewritten. It's been used as scientific racism. I mean, how many times have you heard black people say, the white man brought us religion, the white man brought us the Bible. So we know it's been tampered with. So I've been raised as a Protestant, Reformed. In Dutch we say gereformeerd, so Reformed Protestant. And I used to go to church until I was like 13, 14. And once you're old enough to understand and to read for yourself, I felt like this is not for me. I cannot go to a church where they're praising white skin and we're nothing. We're just sitting there listening to it. And we were the only black family in that church. So I stopped going. My mom still goes till today. But I felt like I cannot be here and sit and listen to lies. So I feel like today I'm a believer, but I do not connect, or I'm not connected to any religions. Let me put it that way.
Do you see black people in the Bible?
Clearly. Very clearly.
So it seems like, if I could give you my professional opinion, it seems like your difficulty with the Protestant church that you were attending is that of identification. You're sitting there and you're seeing everybody that looks, and I'm going to use your terms. You're sitting there and you're sitting amongst albinoism. You're not, and and you're not seeing albinoism within the Bible in context of what you presented today. However, you're seeing you in the Bible. You're seeing blackness, and that's not being represented in that church,
exactly,
or that following. So it kind of spooks you out. I get that. So I would. That, you know what, we may have other discussions later on. I think there's much information that you can add that our time permits today or does not permit today. But I think there's a few more discussions that you and I definitely need to have to look at a few things.
Sure.
So where we are right now, what we're leaving with right now is Melody has presented that the white skin that you see today is due to gene mutation, specifically, or better titled as albinoism. You've also put on a couple theories that other people have suggested over time as to what has caused skin color to change and who's white and who's not and what and so on and so forth. What you laid down is the movement of the albinoism and where it went regionally, and how it ended up to primarily where it is now in Europe or the Europeans, and that's why you see a distinguishable look between them and other traces where the mutation has taken on different forms of a lesser magnitude to where you could see black hair maintaining from the prototype, but maybe a lighter shade of eye color or a lighter shade of skin or whatever it may be, a different hair color, whatever it may be. That's a lot of information. I can't wait to listen to this when we're done with it.
I do want to say two more things.
Oh, please do.
For the people who feel like they're really lost, who feel like I might not have explained it enough because people are trying so hard. English is not my native language, so I'm trying so hard to, try to explain it the best I can. But I do want to leave you guys with two more things to think about. So this is not, one is not science and the other is, common logic or basic logic. So I want to leave you with that to think about. If you feel like if anything I said you didn't pick it up or you didn't understand it, I hope that the next following things that I'm about to say will be helpful. So if you look at the map, the world map, the globe, there's really only a handful of true white people, and with true I mean unmixed. Basically there's only Europe. And then from Europe, people went to North America, to Australia, to South Africa, stuff like that. But there's only a handful. If you compare all the other so-called races or nations, they are either fully black or a mixed race. Now, if you go to the places where lighter skinned nations are living today, where the sun shines, where they claim to be natives or indigenous, there's really a real fun way to tell that they're not from there. We don't need to do all this DNA testing. There's a really fun way of telling that what I'm telling you is true, that they cannot be indigenous. They cannot be the original. And that is, if you go to North Africa, if you go to the Middle East and Africa itself, you have a sun index that can go all the way to 16. So UV index that can go all the way to 16. Mind you that white Europeans can severely burn at an index of 5. So tell me how white-skinned people who claim they were the Egyptians, who claim they are the original Arabs, who claim they have been living in North Africa since the beginning of time, how they can be able to live there when the sun index can go to 16 without the sun killing you. There's a logic explanation for it. They have more pigment than Europeans do. And the only way to get pigment is from us. So I want to leave you with that to think about. I already told you that all the civilizations started off black. So if there's anybody white living there today, claiming they were there since the beginning of time, the sun says that that's not true. It couldn't have been possible, not in your original form, not as an albino, not as a Caucasian. It's not possible. You have to have pigment in order for you to stay alive. And even if you have a tiny bit of pigment, you see that the people who are living there are fully covered. If you type in Arab right now on Google and you go to images, what do you find? A person that is covering their hair with a scarf.
Very true.
You find a person that is covered all the way from, top to bottom. The only thing that is uncovered are the hands, the feet, and the face.
My understanding of that, and it's interesting you say that because I've never thought of it that way. My understanding of that was for 2 reasons. One, religious, because of Islam, they do a lot of coverings. 2, because of sandstorms and sand dunes and, that type of thing. So that's why in my mind, I'm like, I see riding a camel in a desert, you kind of cover up your face. I didn't think about the sun, but that's obvious. But because of the sand. But that's a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. And like I just said, in North Africa, the same thing. You have North Africans, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt. You have all these nations there that claim, no, we are Berbers, we are Amazigh, we are natives. We've been here since the beginning of time. But your DNA, your skin color, your pigment is telling a different story. You couldn't have been. You have pigment. You have more pigment than Europeans do. Another thing that people do not want to understand when we talk about albinism is what I just said, scientific racism. A lot of people do not know that the word slave comes from the Slavics, from Europeans. The first slaves were white. The reason why we have white skin in North Africa is because of white European slaves being brought to Africa. This is not being taught in school because they don't teach anything that is negative for the white race. They don't teach us about the Moors ruling Europe for 700 years. They don't teach us this, and we live here in Europe. They don't tell you about white people being slaves. But the only reason why there's white in North Africa today and white in the Middle East is 1, migration, and 2, slavery. That's the only reason. There's no such thing as indigenous white anywhere on this planet. It does not exist.
So albinoism, I know I think we had touched this briefly, but let's kind of jump into it a bit more to clarify. So does albinoism affect more than just the eye color, skin color, hair color? Does it go to any structural damage? Does it affect the nose, the lips, the limbs, anything like that? Or is it purely based on the skin colors and tones of hair, eye, skin?
When we just read that little piece about the organization of albinism, that little piece about, sorry, let me quickly get it. National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation, they said something about the eyes. So normally when you have albinism, a severe form of albinism, you can have vision issues, vision problems.
Okay.
So like I said, you can. It doesn't mean that all the everybody that has albinism have that same issue. You can be perfectly fine, no illnesses, no problems, no physical problems, no mental problems, and still have albinism. It depends, I guess, on the severity, on which type of albinism you have.
Gotcha.
So there's some who have reddish eyes and most likely have issues with seeing, vision problems. And then you have, for example, an OCH2 form where you can see perfectly fine.
Excellent. Last question. This is probably more of a statement, but formed in a way of a question. The alarming, so when we see somebody with a black albino, we take a look, and it's truly it is a sight to see, because it's kind of it's weird, if I could use that term, because you're looking at a black person with the black features, and we're used to what the skin color should look like, but when we're looking at it, it's the skin. There's no melanin. It's like a white person, but it's those strong black features, and it kind of jumps out at you like, whoa, something's off there. But when you look at a European albino, right, in context of what we're talking about, not just two Europeans who have a child that's an albino child, just regular, it seems more natural. Maybe it's because we're numb to it, the way that we see it, the way that Hollywood portrays. Maybe all that's factored, but it doesn't. I don't look at it and get skirmish or jumpy. I have seen white albinos, and that is it certainly is. It's the same impact when you see a black albino. Like, whoa, it's like almost gray white, right? Just there's no color whatsoever, and blue eyes, or just a cold gray. That's what it looks like. So you do spend some eye candy time there, because it looks just like, whoa. But just the regular, European walking around now, it may even be attractive. You may, hey, look, not bad, right? Is that because of the different variations of albinoism, and because there's some mixing, like a brunette has the albino gene, but maybe mixed with something else, so you see a little bit of a darker hair, but the skin is that what that is? Well,
your question was very long, so but if I understood correctly, I didn't really catch your question in there, but I think you were asking why European albinos or white albinos look slightly less frightening than African albinos. Is that
yes? But specifically, not the European albino that has clearly albinoism with no melanin whatsoever. That looks the same. As same thing. I'm talking about just the natural born European today. After all these thousands of years, the mutated gene has taken set, and they have the look that they have today. It doesn't, I'm not spooked, I'm not scared, it doesn't look ghastly, you know what I mean? It doesn't look terrible.
It's because they have pigment. They have a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of melanin. It's not enough, because if it was enough, they wouldn't be burning in the sun.
Good answer.
If it would be enough, they would be tanning, because there's a few, for example, people from Spain and Italy, they tend to have
and Portugal
brunette phenotype, right? There are more brunettes in Spain and Italy, Portugal.
Yes.
So if they, and it's very warm there. I've been there like 5 times. It's very warm, very nice. They don't burn easily because they have more pigment than somebody from here, from Holland or Belgium or Sweden. Mm-hmm. They have less pigment. Does that mean that people from Portugal are not albinos? They still are, but they have more pigment than somebody from here does.
You know what it is? It's so the term albino or albinoism is broad. So because I could, it's used to say somebody that has zero pigment or somebody that has a higher percentage. So the term, I guess, mutated it's not, it's not the best term, but I understand it.
I think it is, because if we're talking about percentage of melanin, we're going back to what we just discussed about being a lighter skinned black person or being dark skinned.
Right.
I think that mutated is the correct, but that's what we see in the science articles that I send you. You'll see the same words being used by scientists. Mutation is the best way to explain it, because if we're talking about the amount of melanin, we're actually talking about light-skinned black people, and they're not black people anymore. Their genes have mutated into a form that we are now calling them a different race, a white race. Even though there are no different races, we are calling them a different race because they do not look like us anymore. They do not have enough pigment. But them not having enough pigment is not because they cannot preserve as much melanin as we do. It's because their genes mutated and causing them to lack melanin.
Why is it that the Europeans today, although they do come from obvious, as you had said earlier, everybody at one point, the entire world was black. They've mutated, and at this point, the majority of them do not have those black features. What is the reason for that?
Yeah, like I said, you can have thousands and thousands of different phenotypes. They don't really tell you anything. They don't really tell you anything, and at the same time tell you a lot. Because, for example, if you take somebody from West Africa or East Africa, you can clearly see the difference. You'll know this is a Somalian person. Yes. This is a Nigerian, for example. Right. So white people, if you go to the first picture that I sent,
yes,
you'll find a genetic structure and history of Africans and African Americans. It's a genetic map, if you will. Mm-hmm. And you'll find in yellow on your right side, you'll find that they placed Indians of India, not Native Americans, Indians and Europeans together. So it's a genetic distance map. So they're placing the Indians and the Europeans, white Europeans, together.
Which in my mind, I do see that.
I was just about to say that. If you look at a typical Hindu, a typical Indian person, a dark-skinned person, a dark-skinned Indian person, and you envision white Caucasians, white Europeans, do you not see that they are the same people?
Especially,
one is pigmented, one is not.
Especially,
this is why the theory.
It's strong with Italians. It's strong.
What does that mean?
The features, the facial, between Indians and, so if you put not the dark Indians, East Indians, or what am I saying? The right Indians. It says Indian, and we have a tanned Southern Italian. Very similar. Very, very, very similar.
Yeah, but there you go wrong, because the Caucasian race, the white race, they come from the dark-skinned ones, because the white-skinned ones didn't exist yet in that time. the white-skinned or the Aryan, they call themselves also Aryan, the North Indians are actually albinos as well. Because like I said, a large group of those albinos went into Europe, some stayed in Asia, and some came back into what we call today Middle East or Asia, and South Asia, so North India.
That Arab
some
look.
Came back.
That Arab look, like
Exactly. Some came back. So you can't really. I know they fully look alike, but that's because they have the same mutation. That's why they look alike. But if you actually take the dark-skinned Indians, and maybe it's because there's a lot of Indians here in Holland. That's why I can see it clearly.
There's a lot here too. There's a lot here as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of them here in this country. So I can see clearly that white people and those Indians, they're the same people. But one nation has melanin, the other doesn't. This is why that theory of them coming out of Africa, out of India, into Asia, and them having the same Y-DNA haplogroup, and then now this genetic distance map, it all makes sense because they do look alike. One has pigment, the other doesn't.
So, Melody, we have a skin ailment, starts with V. I have difficulty saying it, so I'm not going to. Take a look at the screen. You'll see the word there. But anyway, it appears to have, white spots, spots or something on the skin all over, throughout the body. Is that something similar to what we're speaking of today, albinoism? What do you think that is?
No. Vitiligo is actually a chronic skin disease, and it's not frequent. It's not. We don't see it a lot. So patients people who have this illness, who have this disease, it's actually that the pigment cells are breaking. They're no longer making melanin. They're no longer making this pigment. So they break, and this is why those tiny spots exist. I don't know how to explain it better than that.
No, I think I understand it. So it's just so something has broken down, and it's no longer manufacturing the melanin, so it's showing up on the skin as inefficient or deficient melanin in those particular areas.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the event that a person that has that V word that we haven't pronounced, because I don't pronounce it well, and it overtakes the entire body. Some say that Michael Jackson had that. Could be a rumor, I don't know. But we know what Michael Jackson looked like when he was younger, and later on what he became. They say that he had that V word. It may be bleaching, who knows. But let's assume that his entire body was overtaken by that skin ailment. Would that then enter the category of albinoism, or would you classify that as something different?
No, because he was born as a dark skin, as a black man.
Okay.
We, like you said, we all seen him grow up. So no, he didn't have a mutation of the genes.
It's not. He doesn't have the
and
gene.
And again, vitiligo.
Gotcha. It's not a gene thing. That's a skill malfunction, skin malfunction.
Exactly.
Okay. In the world of science, I'm as layman as you can get. So in the world of science, how does one determine the age of a DNA strand? How does one say this is the oldest found, this is the youngest, this is 2000, this was 100 years ago? How is that determined?
That is a question that we need to ask the archaeologists that dig up the bones. I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to begin. But we do know that those type of bones are being found all over Europe. So when people say, there's a lot of books, by the way, I can send you the titles of them. There's a lot of books that speak about a black Europe. So when white scientists tell us that the bones that they're finding are of black people, I'm not surprised, because this is exactly what those books are telling us. This is exactly what people have been saying for a long time, but because it's not being taught in school, because it's not common knowledge, we're just thinking that, well, Europe is of white people. This is their homeland. This is theirs. But actually, the oldest living persons today are the Khoisan people, and their bones are being found all over Europe, which is strange. That means that they migrated. So you have a lot of black people, especially in America, that you have different types of groups of black people that no longer want to claim their African ancestry, but say, no, we're Aboriginal. We're from here, we're from there. And they use Pangea as an excuse, not knowing that when Pangea was a thing, there were no humans on the planet. So you either migrated, I don't know, by foot, by boat, I don't know. But black people were indeed the first everywhere, but you do all come from the same land, the cradle of civilization, which is Africa. So if the Khoisan are the oldest people on the planet and their bones are being found in Europe, it's because they went there, they migrated.
In reverse, to the theory that we spoke about, if a dark-skinned person moved and lived in a cold climate, or moved to those Caucasus Mountains as they have it, the climate, the altitude, would their skin color change over time?
No, because today they're still dark-skinned Asians, not that many, and not as you would think. They wouldn't look like me, for example, but still a darker, clearly a darker skin than we're used to of Asians. And I have never heard of modern human beings, black human beings, living in cold places and losing their skin color. For example, a large part of my dad's side of the family actually live in Sweden, and one of my best friends live in Norway, and they've been living there since they were little. Some of them born there, and they've been black since the beginning. I feel like food, what we take into our body, also helps. I think that when you eat protein, there's ways of getting vitamin D, which is also of importance when we talk about melanin. I couldn't explain you correctly, but I'll dive in that deeper. That's what I'm actually studying now. I want to understand how vitamin D and the sun and our melanin, our pigment, how that all works together. But I feel like you can live in colder climates and not change color, because if that theory was correct, if it was true that black people would lose their skin in colder climates, then the white race wouldn't have the same DNA haplogroup as the Asians. Then everything that I just told you wouldn't be found by scientists. The white race and the Indians wouldn't be placed together in a genetic distance map.
Gotcha. In times past, in biblical times, in history, and you alluded to it as well, the ancient Egyptians were a black people. Today, they are now, they've become an Arab-looking type of people. What is the explanation for that?
So the Egyptians of today, clearly, if you look at the phenotype that's there, you have a very light-skinned type of Egyptians. You have the kind of mixed mulatto-ish, and then there's, of course, dark-skinned. And just like I said before, the Ottoman Empire is what happened. The Ottoman Empire went into the Middle East. They conquered large parts of the Middle East and North Africa. And then, of course, there were other white nations that came into Egypt as well. Egypt is one of those countries that has been conquered and colonized by many, many, many white tribes. You have the Greeks, the Romans. And mind you, this is when albinos had already entered Europe, because, again, if you go to the first civilizations, everything started off black, including the Romans, including the Greeks. If you don't believe me, look up the Minoans of Greece. They were a black-skinned nation. So you have the Ottoman Empire in North Africa, in the Middle East. They're intermixing with the indigenous black people from those places. And boom, you have mulattoes. And those mulattoes mix with other mulattoes or more white people. And then you get this phenotypical
Arab look.
Arab type of, Arab look that you have today. But you need to understand that the Arabs are not an ethnic group. There's no such thing as an Arab group. They're only Arab-speaking people. They actually have tribes that have names. For example, the Bedouins. The Bedouins started off totally black. And now the Bedouins of today, for example, the king of Saudi Arabia claims that he is from the Bedouin tribe. So if you Google indigenous Bedouins, you'll find black. And then you have a white king saying, I'm a Bedouin. That means that he has black ancestry. Mm-hmm. That means that when the Turkic nations came to the Middle East and North Africa, they're ladies, because a lot of Turkic ladies came with them. I'm not saying Turkish, I'm saying Turkic. Turkic nations came there, and they mixed with black men, and then you have the white or the Arab so-called race.
Gotcha.
But they're not an ethnic group.
Melody, this has been an extreme pleasure. This is by far one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. And I'm being honest. This is by far one of my favorite interviews.
Wow.
There's a lot for me to ponder, to think about, for both of us, and it's been wonderful. And we definitely have to regroup and see how we reapproach and come back and continue on with another conversation, because there's a lot of different angles here. Also, I think I'm going to have to invite you to become my friend. I think we're going to have to stay in contact here. You're a delightful person, very informal. I appreciate that you participated. And I know it's late where you are now, and you've done all, you've sent notes and clippings and images and so on and so forth. So I certainly really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it was an honor speaking with you guys, and I loved being on your show. And I hope that I shed a little bit more light on a different theory of whiteness, of white skin. And I urge people who really want to dig into the necessity of this theory, I invite you to buy this book, The ISIS Papers. Again, I do not agree with her theory about Adam and Eve, but the rest of the book is very, very interesting if you want to know about racism, discrimination, and about whitewashing. That's the place to go. I urge everybody to look up that book and read.
And all your sources, we'll talk offline. I'm going to need as much sources as you have in terms of links, books, and we're going to put it in the video information. So because people are this is going to create a little bit of a stir, because it certainly goes against some things that people are saying to try to disprove that Israelites are black. That's one. This definitely opens the windows. So, okay, I want you to go to bed. I know you got to get up soon, and take care, and we'll talk tomorrow.